Dr. Williams had lived in Canada for 10 years. He settled in Toronto, where he built a successful career as a medical doctor. With years of experience and several awards to his name, he had become well known for completing complex surgeries. Dr. Williams originally trained as a brain surgeon in Nigeria and graduated with first-class honors. Before relocating, he gained early professional experience by practicing in Nigeria for a few years. His reputation continued to grow in Canada, where he was admired for his medical talent. Before moving abroad, Dr. Williams was married with 2 children. His wife, Ekaette, had stayed behind in Nigeria with their children. He had promised to bring them to Canada once he got settled. Ekaette agreed with hope and trust, believing her husband would follow through. However, time passed. At first, Dr. Williams kept in touch frequently. Then the calls became less frequent, first once a week, then once a month, and eventually they stopped altogether. Financial support also ended about 6 months after his move. For nearly 9 years, Ekaette managed on her own, raising their children while waiting for a reunion that never came. This doesn't feel right, Aket often thought. He was never like this before he traveled. Something must have changed. Though she didn't have formal education, Ekaette was a hard-working and resourceful businesswoman. She ran a successful crayfish business in Uyo, supplying retailers and rebuilding her livelihood from scratch after helping fund her husband's journey abroad. In fact, when Dr. Williams wanted to relocate, it was Ekaette who gave him 15 million naira from her business savings to support his plans. After he traveled, she was left with nothing and had to rebuild by collecting goods on credit until she was stable again. Years later, watching her children grow without their father, Ekaette made a bold decision. "I can't just wait anymore," she told herself. "I'll go to Canada with the children and find my husband." As she rode home in Ekaette from the market that evening, she mentally calculated her savings and considered her next steps. She emptied her bank account and used the funds to apply for visas for herself and her children. The process was costly, but after 3 months, their visas were approved. They flew to Canada and spent their first night in a hotel. The next morning, Ekaette took the children to the hospital where her husband once worked. "I'm sorry," said the receptionist. "Dr. Williams stopped working here 5 years ago." Ekaette and her children left quietly. Back at the hotel, she began to worry. The money she had was already gone, used for the visa process, flights, and hotel stay. They had only booked 2 nights, and their time was almost up. With little left, Ekaette was unsure where to go or who to turn to. "If I had known, I might have stayed back in Nigeria and continued with my business," she thought. "But I had to try. I had to do something." She began searching online for support. One of her searches directed her to the Nigerian community in Canada. There was a helpline available for those in need, so she called. To her surprise, someone picked up right away. "This is the Nigerian community in Canada. How can we assist you?" Ekaette introduced herself and explained her situation. "I came to Canada with my children to find my husband, Dr. Williams Akara. We haven't seen him in nearly 10 years. "You mean Dr. Williams?" "Yes, he's a well-known doctor here." The voice on the line replied. "Is he really your husband?" "Yes," Ekaette answered. "He got married to me before leaving Nigeria. I just want to find him." The young man on the phone paused, then said, "Please come to the community office tomorrow. I'll give you the address, but kindly keep my name private. I'm sharing this because your story moved me." Grateful, Ekaette thanked him and received the location via text. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were filled with hope and anticipation. Early the next morning, Ekaette and her children set out. The man at the community office didn't say much. He simply wrote down Dr. Williams' home address on a piece of paper and handed it to her discreetly. He hadn't contacted Dr. Williams in advance, sensing that the doctor may have avoided reconnecting with his past. With address in hand, Ekaette hailed a taxi and handed it to the driver. They didn't have to travel far. When they arrived, the house number matched the one written on the paper. Ekaette stepped out of the taxi with her children following close behind. Her heart was racing. "Come on, kids," she said softly, trying to hold back tears. "Let's go and see your father after all these years." She approached the gate, uncertain of what awaited her, but hopeful that her long journey might finally bring the reunion she had waited so long for. The house where Dr. Williams lived in Canada was grand and elegant. Its well-kept surroundings and polished exterior reflected the success he had built over the years. As Ekaette and her 2 children approached the gate, they were filled with mixed emotions: hope, nervousness, and wonder. Her heart beat quickly with anticipation. Her children, unaware of the complexities of adult life, were excited to finally meet the father they had only known through stories and pictures. For years they had asked about him, and Ekaette had always replied, "He's working at the hospital." But deep down, she carried the pain of raising them without the support of their father. As they entered the compound, Ekaette looked around and smiled slightly. The home was beautiful. "He must be doing well," she thought. "At least we know he is alive and thriving. Perhaps we can start over as a family." She imagined going back to the hotel to retrieve their bags and returning to stay with her husband. After all the hardship she endured back in Nigeria, it felt like a new beginning might finally be possible. They reached the front door and knocked. A few moments later, a young woman answered. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, visibly pregnant and polite, but surprised to see them. "Hello, can I help you?" the woman asked. Ekaette smiled and said, "Good afternoon. My name is Ekaette. I came from Nigeria with my children. We're looking for Dr. Williams. He is my husband, and these are his children." The young woman's expression shifted. She looked confused, even alarmed. 2 children came to the door and stood beside her. The scene was now tense. "I'm sorry," she replied slowly. "Dr. Williams is my husband. These are our children. We've been married for over 7 years. He never told me he had a wife or children before. Are you sure you're at the right house?" Ekaette's heart sank. She was stunned. "I came here because I believed in him. He promised to bring us over one day. I supported him when he had nothing. I helped him travel here. And now, this..." The young woman stepped back slightly, clearly upset. "Please," she said, "I don't want any trouble. If you're mistaken, I suggest you check the address again. If not, I may have to involve the authorities." Ekaette stood still, overwhelmed. She took a deep breath and tried to stay composed. "I'm not here for trouble," she replied. "I only want to speak with my husband. We've been apart for 10 years, and my children have longed for their father. I only need answers." Eventually, the woman went inside to call Dr. Williams. He was seated in a room when she spoke to him. "There's a woman at the door asking for you," she said calmly. "She's here with 2 children. She says she's your wife." Dr. Williams was frozen. He didn't move for a moment. The name Ekaette echoed in his ears. He slowly stood and followed his wife to the front door. There, standing in front of him, were 3 faces he never thought he'd see in Canada. His wife, his children, all staring at him with hope. The children ran to him. "Daddy, Daddy, we missed you. Why did you leave us?" But instead of embracing them, Dr. Williams hesitated. He looked at his wife, then at the young woman beside him, and then at the children. The weight of his choices caught up to him. "I don't know you," he said quietly. "You must be mistaken. I was never married before coming to Canada. These are my only children, and this is my wife." Ekaette and her children were shocked. The children stopped in their tracks, confused. "But Daddy, you're in the pictures at home. Mommy talks about you every day." "I'm sorry," he said again. "You need to leave. This is not your home." The young woman stepped forward and nodded. "Please leave. This is our home. We don't want to escalate this." Heartbroken, Ekaette stood speechless. She had sacrificed everything for this man. She had given him her savings, raised their children alone, and traveled across the world for the hope of a reunion. And now she was being told to leave. Her children clung to her dress. They didn't understand why their father was denying them. They just wanted his hug. But there would be no hug that day. Ekaette turned around quietly. With tears in her eyes, she walked out of the compound with her children by her side. They found a place by the roadside to sit down and process what had just happened. No words were spoken, only silent tears. I hope you enjoyed this story. A big shout out to Israel Usulor for generously giving me permission to share his amazing story for free. The final part of this story has also been posted, so be sure to check it out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. It really helps the channel grow.